and welcome to Crowvane Manor. Wherever you are, and whatever kind of night it's been, you've come to the right place to slow down. Let the world go quiet for a while. Out here, none of it needs your attention. Many of you return to these rooms night after night, and I'm grateful for that. There's a reason you keep coming back. The stories kept inside these walls aren't quite like the ones you'll hear anywhere else. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell me where in the world you're listening from tonight. I always enjoy reading them. And if these stories stay with you, a like and a subscribe help more than you know. Now get comfortable, breathe slow, and let's open the door together.
He actually said it like it was some kind of joke, like he was being clever, like he expected me to laugh along with him. We were sitting there together, and he looked at me with this smug little expression and told me he could have gold. But he went for bronze instead, and that bronze was me. The way he said it wasn't playful in a sweet way. It was like he was proud of himself for thinking it. Like he wanted me to understand my place. I remember staring at him for a second, waiting for the part where he would say he was kidding, waiting for the moment where he would soften it, or reach for my hand, or show even a tiny bit of regret. But he didn't. He just sat there like he had spoken some truth that I needed to accept. And in that moment, something inside me tightened. I felt my face get warm, felt my stomach sink, and I tried to swallow the hurt because I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing it land. I told myself maybe he didn't mean it the way it sounded. Maybe he was just being stupid. Maybe he didn't realize how cruel it was. But deep down, I knew he did. He said it because he wanted me to feel smaller, because he wanted me to believe I was lucky he stayed. Because if I believed that, then I'd stop expecting better. That was the pattern with him. It wasn't one big dramatic moment where he showed who he was. It was constant little things that wore me down. He had this strange, almost childish way of getting irritated when I looked peaceful. If I was on the couch, finally comfortable, scrolling on my phone or watching something, or just sitting there with my shoulders relaxed, and he was stressed or annoyed about something, he couldn't stand that I wasn't matching his mood. It was like my comfort offended him. He would walk into the room, see me resting, and something about his face would shift. He wouldn't say, "Hey, what are you watching?" or "How was your day?" He'd find some way to disrupt the moment, like he needed to prove that I didn't deserve to feel calm unless he felt calm too. Sometimes it was obvious, like slamming a cabinet too hard or sighing loudly, pacing around so I couldn't ignore him. Other times it was more sneaky. He'd start talking at me, not to me, in this sharp tone that demanded attention. If I didn't respond the exact way he wanted, he'd act like I was rude. And if I tried to keep the peace and keep my voice soft, he'd push harder. He made relaxation feel like something I needed permission for. Even when I wasn't doing anything wrong, even when I had done everything I was supposed to do, I still felt like I had to stay alert because he might decide I was too comfortable. And then there were the ways he touched me. This is the part that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it, because it wasn't affection. It wasn't playful flirting. It was like he knew exactly what bothered me, and he liked that it bothered me. He would touch my belly button or poke me in a very specific way, like right at the spot that made me tense up instantly. It wasn't a gentle tap. It was that annoying, invasive kind of poke that feels like someone stepping into your personal space on purpose. I told him so many times that I hated it. I didn't say it once in passing. I said it clearly. I said it seriously. I told him it made me uncomfortable and I needed him to stop. And every time, he would smile like it was funny. He would act like I was being dramatic. He would do it again later, almost like he was testing me, like he wanted to see if I'd react the same way. It started to feel like he enjoyed my discomfort, like he got something out of seeing me flinch, seeing me squirm, seeing me try to pull away. If I pushed his hand away, he'd act offended, like I was rejecting him. If I tried to laugh it off, to keep things from turning into an argument, he'd take that as permission. It was such a small thing on the surface, but it wasn't small to live with. It meant that even my body didn't feel fully like mine around him. Even when I was just sitting there, even when I was relaxed, I could never fully relax because he might decide to poke, grab, touch, annoy, just to remind me that he had access and control. It made me feel like my boundaries were optional, like my comfort didn't matter. The worst part was how normal he acted about it afterward. Like he didn't just ignore a clear boundary. Like he wasn't use my body as a toy. He could switch from doing something that upset me to talking about dinner or work or whatever, like nothing happened. Meanwhile, I'd be sitting there with my nerves buzzing, feeling irritated and embarrassed and confused, wondering why I couldn't just be chill, wondering why I was always the one who had to adjust and calm down and let it go. He also loved to turn everything into a scorecard. He would ask me again and again what I contributed to the relationship. Not in a genuine way, not in a let's talk about how we can support each other way. He asked it like an accusation, like I was on trial and he was the judge. I could be doing things every single day that kept our life running, helping him, showing up for him, listening to him, being there when he was stressed, handling responsibilities, managing the emotional side of things, and it still wasn't counted. He would bring it up when he was angry or when he wanted to win an argument, like he had been quietly collecting evidence that I wasn't enough. I remember times when I'd just blink at him because it was such a ridiculous question, and yet it hurt so badly. It made me instantly start listing things in my head like I had to prove my value. I'd think about what I did around the house, how I supported his plans, how I listened to him talk about his day, how I showed up for him in ways he didn't even notice, how I was constantly trying to keep peace between us. But the fact that he could look at me and ask that question, like I was some kind of useless roommate he was considering evicting, made me feel like nothing I did mattered unless he decided it mattered. And even when I answered him, even when I gave real examples, he would twist it. He'd say it didn't count, or it wasn't enough, or he did more, or I was exaggerating. There was never a moment where he said, "You're right, you do a lot, and I appreciate you." Appreciation was not something he gave freely. It was like he believed being grateful would make him weaker. He wanted me always reaching for his approval, always trying to earn basic kindness. He wanted me in that position where I was working and proving and explaining. Because when you're busy proving your worth, you don't have time to realize someone else is treating you badly. Then he came up with this idea about buckets, and I hate even remembering it because it was so manipulative. He told me he was going to stop hugging me because he was filling my bucket emotionally, but I wasn't filling his bucket, meaning his sexual needs. He said it like he was being logical, like he had discovered some fair system. Like affection was a currency he was paying out, and if he wasn't getting what he wanted, he would cut off the supply. It was so cold, so calculated. And the thing is, he knew hugs mattered to me. He knew physical affection, like a hug could calm me down and make me feel safe. So he took that away as punishment. He framed it like a reasonable boundary, but it wasn't. It was a threat, and it was meant to train me. I remember feeling shocked, like I had to replay his words in my head to make sure I heard him right. Because who says that to someone they love? Who turns something as simple and human as a hug into a negotiation? He was basically saying, if you don't give me sex the way I want it, you don't deserve comfort. He tried to make it sound like I was failing him, like I was the one not meeting needs, while completely ignoring that he was choosing to remove kindness as a way to pressure me. And if I got upset, he'd act like I was unreasonable, like he was the victim, like I didn't understand relationships. He'd talk about needs, like that one word could cover everything and excuse everything. He never talked about my needs with the same seriousness. My need for respect, my need for safety, my need to not be insulted, my need to not have my boundaries mocked, my need for emotional warmth without it being used as a tool. Those were always treated like optional extras. But his needs were treated like demands that should be met immediately or else. What really messed with my head was how he always assumed I was wrong about everything. It didn't matter what the subject was. It could be something tiny, like remembering what time an appointment was, or recalling something someone had said, or even explaining how I felt about a situation. His default setting was that I was incorrect. If I said I remembered something happening a certain way, he'd look at me like I was making it up. If I said something bothered me, he'd tell me it shouldn't. If I said I didn't like something he did, he'd say I was overreacting. If I expressed an opinion, he'd treat it like it needed to be corrected. The only time he would even consider that I might be right was if I had solid proof, and even then, he acted like it was annoying that I proved it. Like it was inconvenient for him that reality didn't match his version. There were times I'd pull up a text message or an email or a screenshot just to show him, and instead of saying, "Oh, my bad," he'd move the goalposts. He'd say it didn't matter, or he'd say I was being obsessive, or he'd change the topic and find something else to criticize. He didn't want truth. He wanted dominance. He wanted to be the one who decided what was real and what wasn't. Living like that slowly changes you. You start second-guessing your own mind. You start pausing before you speak because you know you're going to be challenged. You start explaining yourself too much, giving too many details, trying to build a case before you even say something simple. You start feeling anxious, like you have to prepare for debate over the smallest thing. And after a while, you start thinking, maybe you really are wrong all the time. Maybe you really do remember things wrong. Maybe you really are too sensitive. That's how it works. It's not just the arguments. It's the constant message underneath everything. I'm the authority. You're unreliable. There were days when I would catch myself trying to act smaller, quieter, less noticeable, because I didn't want to trigger him. I didn't want to look too happy if he wasn't happy. I didn't want to relax too openly. I didn't want to speak too confidently. I didn't want to set him off. It's such a strange thing to realize later. How much energy you spend managing someone else's mood. How you start organizing your whole life around avoiding their irritation. And the saddest part is that at the time, I kept trying. I kept thinking if I just explained better, if I just worked harder, if I just stayed calm, if I just proved myself, he would finally see me. He would finally respect me. He would finally treat me like someone he loved instead of someone he tolerated. I thought if I could be good enough, he would stop making me feel like bronze. But the truth was, he liked me feeling like bronze. He benefited from it. Because if I believed I was less than, then I would accept less than. Even now, remembering his words and his behaviors, I can still feel the way it wore me down. That gold and bronze comment wasn't an isolated insult. It was a summary of how he viewed me. He wanted me to be grateful for being chosen. He wanted me to feel like I needed to earn affection. He wanted to control when I felt comfortable, when I felt safe, when I felt valued. He wanted to train me to accept that my needs came second, that my boundaries could be laughed at, that my feelings could be dismissed, that my memory and judgment were always questionable, unless proven in a courtroom-level way. And there's a certain kind of loneliness in being with someone like that, because you're never truly seen. You're always being measured, always being evaluated, always being corrected. You start to miss what you thought love was supposed to feel like. You start craving simple warmth, simple kindness, simple respect, and you feel guilty for craving it, because they've convinced you that you're asking for too much. I used to replay moments in my head, trying to figure out how a normal person would act. A normal person doesn't get angry at their partner for being relaxed. A normal person hears, "I don't like when you touch me like that," and stops, because they care about your comfort more than their amusement. A normal person doesn't turn hugs into a sexual bargaining tool. A normal person doesn't treat every conversation like a chance to prove you're wrong. Those things are not quirks. They're choices. They're patterns. They're signs of someone who doesn't respect you as an equal human being. And once you see that, you realize it wasn't your job to be gold, or to compete for gold, or to prove you were worth basic decency. You were always worth it. The problem was never that you were bronze. The problem was that he needed you to believe you were. The day before our wedding was supposed to feel like a soft, happy blur. The kind of day where you wake up nervous but excited, where everything feels like it's moving towards something beautiful. I remember trying to hold on to that feeling, trying to stay calm and focused while so many little things needed to be done. People were calling, messages were coming in, last-minute details were being confirmed, and everyone kept telling me how lucky I was, how magical tomorrow would be, how this was the start of my real life. And I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe that all the stress and planning would be worth it, that the nerves and the exhaustion were just part of the normal wedding experience, and that by the time I walked down the aisle, I would feel safe and loved and chosen. But the day before the wedding, something happened that should have stopped me in my tracks. I didn't know it at the time, not fully. I didn't understand the full meaning of it in that moment. I only felt the sting and tried to explain it away. But when I look back now, it stands out like a bright warning sign. It was the moment where the truth showed itself clearly, and I was too deep in everything to listen. We had planned a first dance like so many couples do. It wasn't even about putting on a show or trying to impress anyone. For me, it was about sharing one simple, sweet moment together. A moment where the noise of everyone else would fade out for a little while, and it would just be us, holding each other, moving slowly to a song that meant something. A moment that felt intimate, even in a room full of people. A moment that said, without words, we are in this together. We had even done lessons for it. That's what makes it worse when I think about it. We didn't just casually talk about it. We committed time. We practiced. We worked on it. We stood in a room with an instructor, counting steps, trying again when we messed up, laughing sometimes when it got awkward, and slowly getting better. It took effort. It took planning. It took agreement. So in my mind, that first dance was already part of our story. It was already promised. It was something I looked forward to when I imagined the wedding day. I pictured his hand on my back, my hand in his, our friends and family watching, smiling, and maybe even tearing up a little. I pictured myself finally breathing after a day of nerves, thinking, okay, we made it. We're married. We're starting our life. Then the day before the wedding, I was pulled aside. Not by him, by his mom. That detail alone should have made me pause. Because why would his mother be the one to deliver a message like that? Why would a grown man about to get married send his mom to handle something that was clearly between him and me? But he did. His mom came to me and said she needed to talk to me for a second. The way she approached me made it feel like something serious, like I was being called in for a quiet warning. She pulled me aside, away from everyone else, away from the noise of the wedding stuff happening around us. And she told me that he wouldn't be dancing with me. Not that he was nervous and wanted to keep it simple. Not that he wanted to do something different. Not even that he wanted to talk about it. Just he wouldn't be dancing with me. And while she said it, he stood behind her. He didn't stand next to me. He didn't step forward and speak for himself. He didn't look me in the eyes and explain. He didn't even try to soften it. He used his mother like a shield, like a wall between us, and he stayed back where he didn't have to face my reaction directly. It felt humiliating. That's the only word that fits. Because it wasn't just disappointing. It wasn't just a change of plans. It was the way it was done, the way it was delivered, the way I was treated like I didn't deserve direct communication. Like my feelings could be handled by someone else. Like he couldn't even be bothered to deal with the emotional fallout of his own decision. I remember my face going hot. I remember my stomach dropping. I remember trying to keep my expression normal because it was the day before the wedding and people were everywhere. And I didn't want to cause a scene. I didn't want to look like the dramatic bride. I didn't want to ruin anything. I didn't want to create tension, so I swallowed it. I probably nodded. I probably forced some kind of polite response, something like, "Oh, okay." I probably smiled a little too, the kind of smile you give when you are trying not to cry in public. And inside, I felt this sharp, quiet heartbreak, like someone had reached in and pinched something tender. Because it wasn't just a dance, it was what it represented. We had put the work in, we had practiced, we had planned it. And now, the day before the wedding, he decided he wasn't going to do it. And he didn't even tell me himself. The message underneath it was loud, even if nobody said it out loud. Your hopes don't matter as much as my comfort. Your feelings can be managed. You will adjust. You will accept what I decide. And if you get hurt, that's your problem. When I look back now, I realize it was also about control. Because by doing it that way, he put me in a corner. It was the day before the wedding. The venue was booked. People had traveled. Money had been spent. Family was excited. Expectations were set. I was already surrounded by this pressure to keep going, and he knew that. He knew how hard it would be for me to suddenly stop everything and question whether we should even get married. So he picked a moment where I would be least likely to fight back, least likely to make a big decision, most likely to swallow my hurt and keep moving forward. And he used his mother to deliver the message so he could stand back and let the situation unfold without being the one directly responsible in the moment. It was cowardly. But at the time, I didn't call it that. At the time, I tried to make it make sense. I tried to tell myself he was just nervous, or he didn't want attention, or maybe he was shy, or maybe the lessons made him feel embarrassed. I tried to invent reasons that would make it feel less personal. Because the truth, the real truth, was painful. The truth was that he didn't care enough about how it would make me feel to handle it with love and respect. The truth was that he was willing to take something from me that I was looking forward to, something we had agreed on, and he didn't even think I deserved a real conversation. The truth was that he was setting the tone for what marriage with him would look like, and that tone was, "I will do what I want, and you will deal with it." That was the moment I should have known. Not because a dance is the biggest thing in the world, but because it showed a pattern. It showed how he handled emotional moments. It showed how he communicated. It showed how he avoided accountability. It showed how he would rather hide behind someone else than show up as a partner. It also showed something about how his family was involved and how comfortable he was letting his mother step into places she didn't belong, because a first dance is between the bride and groom. It's not something a mother needs to negotiate, but he made it that way. He turned it into a message delivered like a scolding or an announcement, instead of a private discussion between two adults who were about to commit their lives to each other. And then, even after that, we still got married. That's the part that hits me the hardest, because I can feel the version of myself from that time. The version of me who was trying so hard to keep everything together. The version of me who didn't want to disappoint anyone. The version of me who had invested so much already, emotionally and financially and socially. I can feel how trapped she felt by the moment. How she thought, it's just a dance. It's not worth blowing up a wedding over. It will be fine. He'll be a better husband once we're married. That's what so many people tell themselves. Once we're married, it'll settle. Once the stress is over, he'll be softer. Once we're in real life, he'll show up differently. But the truth is, real life doesn't magically improve someone's character. Marriage doesn't turn a selfish person into a caring one. If anything, it can make them more confident in their behavior, because they think you're locked in now. They think you won't leave. They think you'll tolerate more. After we got married, there were several other things. There always are when you look back. It's never just one moment. It's a series of moments that build a pattern. But that one, the day before the wedding, stands out because it was so clear. It was like the universe handed me a sign, and I looked right past it, because I wanted the dream more than I wanted the truth. I wish we hadn't gotten married. Not because I'm bitter about a dance. Not because I wanted some perfect wedding memory, but because that moment was a preview of what my place would be in his life. Secondary, managed, expected to shrink my needs. Expected to accept his choices without question. It was the beginning of me learning, slowly, painfully, that he didn't see me as an equal partner whose feelings mattered. He saw me as someone who would adapt to him. And if I'm honest, it wasn't just about him. It was also about me and what I didn't believe I deserved at that time. I didn't believe I deserved someone who could look me in the eye and say, "I know this matters to you, so I want to talk about it with you." I didn't believe I deserved someone who would protect my feelings, especially on a day that was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. I thought love meant compromise. I thought love meant patience. I thought love meant sometimes swallowing hurt to keep peace. But love isn't supposed to come with humiliation. Love isn't supposed to come with a grown man hiding behind his mother while he takes something away from you. That moment should have been my boundary. It should have been my wake-up call. It should have been the moment I said, "If you can't even show up for me in something small and meaningful like this, what happens when life gets hard?" Because life does get hard. It always does. People get sick. People lose jobs. Babies are born. Parents die. Stress hits. Real responsibility shows up. And if someone can't show basic respect and direct communication in the calm moments, they are not going to suddenly develop it in the difficult ones. Now, looking, I understand why that moment lives in me the way it does. It wasn't a single disappointment. It was the first time I saw clearly that he was willing to embarrass me, to dismiss something important to me, and to avoid my emotions like they were something dirty he didn't want to touch. It's strange how we can ignore a red flag when it's wrapped in wedding glitter and surrounded by people telling you to smile. It's strange how easily we can convince ourselves that something is not that serious when deep down we feel the truth in our bones. But I feel it now. That was the moment I should have known, and I wish I had listened to myself. We went away on our first real couple getaway, the kind you build up in your head for weeks beforehand. It wasn't just a trip, it felt like a milestone. Like we were stepping into that next phase where you stop being two people who only see each other in regular life settings and start becoming a real unit, a team, the kind of couple that travels together and makes memories together. I remember the excitement of it, the planning, the packing, the little fantasies that sneak into your mind when you're in a new relationship and everything still feels full of possibility. I pictured us laughing more, relaxing, talking late into the night, coming home even closer than we were before. At that point, I genuinely believed we were building something solid. I knew every relationship has its differences, but I didn't think those differences were anything we couldn't handle. I thought this trip would be sweet and fun, and maybe even prove to both of us that we worked well outside of our normal routines. I wanted it to be one of those memories you look back on later and smile. The beginning of the getaway was normal enough. We did the typical couple things. We got settled, explored a bit, ate out, talked about random stuff. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would make you think things were about to shift. That's what made what happened later hit so strangely. It wasn't like we were arguing. It wasn't like we were already tense. It came out of a regular conversation, which somehow made it worse because it showed how natural it was for him to think that way. At some point, we got into a conversation about finances. Not even in a heavy, stressful way, just the kind of conversation people have when they're adults and they start thinking about long-term goals. It drifted into topics like IRAs and high-yield savings accounts, the kind of stuff that might sound boring to some people, but is actually important. I didn't bring it up to show off. I didn't bring it up to lecture him. It was just a real conversation about real life, and honestly, I like talking about those things. I always have. I've worked hard for what I have, and learning how money works, how savings works, how retirement accounts work was part of me taking my life seriously. I didn't realize, though, that he had been carrying this assumption about me the whole time. I didn't realize that he had put me into a mental box where he saw me as somehow less capable or less smart. I didn't even know that was on the table, because in my mind, why would it be? He knew my life. He knew my background. He knew what I had accomplished. It never occurred to me that he looked at me and saw someone who couldn't have an intelligent conversation. But while we were talking, I could see him reacting. He looked surprised, not in a casual, oh wow, interesting way, but in a genuine, almost stunned way, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. It was like he had expected me to be clueless, and now he was watching me talk in a way that didn't match the story he had written about me. And then he turned to me and said, very matter-of-factly, like he was stating a simple fact, "This is the most intelligent conversation I have ever had with you." He didn't say it as a compliment. Or if he thought it was a compliment, it was one of those compliments that's really an insult wearing a polite mask. The way he said it was flat, almost casual, like it was a normal thing to say to your partner on a romantic trip. Like I should be proud of it. Like I should feel honored that I had finally met his standard for intelligence. For a second, I think my brain froze. Because sometimes when someone says something that rude and unexpected, it takes a moment to even understand what just happened. I remember looking at him and feeling this wave of shock, then hurt, then a kind of disbelief that turned into anger. It was like my mind kept trying to soften it. Maybe he meant something else. Maybe he worded it badly. Maybe he's trying to say he enjoyed the conversation. Maybe he's not realizing how that sounds. But no matter how I tried to twist it, the message underneath it was clear. He was saying that until that moment, he didn't consider our conversations intelligent. He was saying he didn't see me as smart. He was saying that the version of me he was used to was, in his mind, less than. And the thing is, I wasn't some teenager figuring life out. I was a grown woman. I was college educated. I had a 6-figure job. I owned my own house and my own car. I had built a life for myself. I had responsibilities. I had a career. I had done all the things adults do when they're serious about their future, and I did them without anyone handing them to me. During that exact period of our relationship, he was still beginning his career. He was still going to school. He relied on me to spell check and grammar check his papers. He still lived at home with his family. He kept failing his driver's test. And we weren't 22. We were both in our early 30s. Most of that getaway I paid for. Not because I wanted to hold it over his head. Not because I enjoyed being the one to cover things. But because he simply couldn't afford it. I wanted the trip. I wanted us to go. I thought it would be good for us. So I made it happen. I didn't think that made him less than. I didn't think that made him dumb. I didn't treat him like he was inferior for needing time to build his career. I looked at him as a partner and assumed we were supporting each other in different ways. So to hear him imply that I was the unintelligent one was honestly insulting in a way that's hard to explain. It wasn't just a rude comment. It was into what he really believed about me. It was like he had been carrying around an invisible ranking system, and in his head, I wasn't near the top. What hurt even more was how confident he sounded. Like he hadn't even considered that his words could be hurtful. Like he had every right to say it. Like it was a normal observation he could share without thinking twice. I tried to respond in the moment, but it wasn't easy. When someone hits you with something like that, you can either laugh it off, get defensive, or go quiet while you process it. I remember feeling my stomach tighten, my chest get that hot, uncomfortable feeling, and my mind racing. Part of me wanted to snap back and list out every reason his comment was ridiculous. Part of me wanted to ask, why would you say that? Part of me wanted to simply sit there and stare at him until he heard how awful he sounded. But there's also this weird thing that happens when you're with someone you care about. Sometimes you don't want to fully confront the truth right away, because you know that if you do, it will change everything. And I think that's what happened to me. I didn't want to ruin the trip. I didn't want to admit that this could be a deeper issue. I didn't want to believe he truly thought so little of me. So I did what I had probably done before without realizing it. I minimized my own feelings. I tried to brush past it. I tried to keep the moment moving forward. But something inside me shifted. Because after that, I started paying attention. It wasn't a dramatic decision like, I'm going to investigate him. It was more like my eyes were suddenly opened, and I couldn't close them again. The comment sat in the back of my mind, and every time we talked, every time he reacted to something I said, every time he dismissed my opinion, or acted like he knew better without actually knowing better, I noticed it. It was like his one sentence had given me a key, and now I could unlock all the little moments I had ignored before. And once you start noticing, you can't unnotice. I started seeing the subtle ways he talked down to me, the little pauses, the tone shifts, the way he'd act surprised when I understood something. as if it was unexpected. The way he'd correct me, even when I was right. The way he'd treat my knowledge like an exception instead of a normal part of who I am. The way he'd act like my achievements were somehow unrelated to intelligence, like I just stumbled into them. It became incredibly evident how little he thought of me. Not in a dramatic, obvious way where he would directly call me stupid all the time, but in the steady undercurrent of the relationship. In the way he looked at me when I spoke. In the way he reacted when I had an opinion. In the way he seemed to believe he was the smart one, the capable one, the one whose thoughts carried more weight. And what makes that kind of dynamic so painful is that it slowly changes how you show up. You start to second guess yourself. You start to explain yourself more than you should. You start to shrink your ideas so you don't get that look from them again. You start to choose silence over sharing because it's exhausting to feel judged every time you speak. I also started thinking about the imbalance that had existed the whole time, not just financially, but emotionally too. I had been supporting him, helping him, cheering him on, fixing his papers, encouraging him through school, make space for his goals. I had done it because I believed in him and because I thought that's what partners do. You lift each other up. But now I realized something. He wasn't lifting me up at all. He wasn't proud of me in the way a loving partner should be. He wasn't looking at my life and thinking, wow, she's amazing. She's built so much. I respect her. He was looking at my life and still somehow thinking he was above me. That's a hard thing to accept. Because it's not just an insult. It's a betrayal of the respect you thought was there. You can't have a healthy relationship without respect. Love without respect becomes something ugly. It becomes a power game, even if nobody admits it out loud. After that trip, the relationship didn't last much longer. And when I say that, it's not because I ended it the next day. It's because once you see that someone doesn't truly value you, the foundation cracks. You start feeling less safe. You start feeling less excited about the future. You start feeling like you're working too hard to be understood, too hard to be taken seriously, too hard to be treated like an equal. I realized I didn't want to spend my life proving myself to the person who was supposed to know my worth without being convinced. I didn't want to be in a relationship where my intelligence was treated like a surprise. I didn't want to keep giving support to someone who looked at me through a lens of judgment and superiority. That one sentence, delivered so casually, ended up being one of the most revealing things he ever said. Because it wasn't just about IRAs or savings accounts. It was about how he saw me. It was about the quiet disrespect he had been carrying the whole time. And the truth is, I didn't become smarter during that conversation. I didn't suddenly transform into someone intelligent in the middle of a getaway. I was always the same person. I was always capable, always educated, always building, always thinking. The only thing that changed was that he let his real opinion slip out, and I finally stopped ignoring what had been right in front of me. Looking back, I'm glad I paid attention. I'm glad I didn't keep brushing those signs aside. Because anyone can be charming or appreciative on the surface, but the way someone truly sees you shows up in moments like that, when they speak without thinking, when their hidden assumptions spill out in plain words. And once you hear it, you can't pretend you didn't. We went indoor climbing with a group of friends, one of those plans that's supposed to be fun and light, the kind of day where you feel proud of yourself for doing something active and social at the same time. I remember the gym being loud in a normal way, full of people laughing and calling out encouragement, the dull thud of shoes against padded floors, chalk dust in the air, and that constant background sound of ropes sliding and carabiners clinking. Everyone was in a good mood. It felt like a little break from regular life, like for a couple hours we could just focus on climbing walls and cheering each other on. At first, everything was fine. I wasn't doing anything crazy, just working through easier routes and enjoying the feeling of moving, trying handholds, and laughing when I slipped or got stuck. The wall I fell from wasn't even one of the scary ones. It was a level 3. Something I had done before and didn't consider dangerous. I remember being a little tired, maybe about an hour and a half in, but still feeling okay. I stepped into a move that felt normal, and then suddenly it wasn't. My grip went wrong, my balance shifted, and in a blink I was coming down. I landed on one foot. There wasn't time to brace properly, no time to twist or catch myself. The moment my foot hit the ground, I knew something was wrong in a way that's hard to describe unless you've felt it. It wasn't just pain. It was immediate, sharp, and final. Like my body understood the injury before my brain could even catch up. There was that sick, hot burst of pain that makes your stomach drop. And then the weird feeling of your leg not working the way it should. I couldn't stand. I couldn't pretend it was fine. I think I made a sound I didn't mean to make because the pain forced it out of me, and everything around me changed instantly. Friends who had been laughing a second earlier rushed over. Voices got serious. People started asking questions at the same time, and someone called for staff. He, though, was great in front of everyone. That's a strange thing to say about the person you're with, but it's true. In the moment, with the group watching, he looked like the perfect partner. He came over quickly, acted calm and in control, and he picked me up and carried me. He spoke in the right tone, like he was worried but steady, like he had everything handled. People were telling him what a good job he was doing. Friends looked relieved, like, okay, she's safe, he's taking care of her. I remember feeling scared and shaky, but also a little comforted by how he was acting. When you're hurt and everyone is staring, and you're trying not to panic, you cling to whatever makes you feel like you're not alone. He carried me to the car and drove me to the emergency room. We stayed there all night. The ER is its own world, especially late at night. Everything is bright in an unnatural way, but somehow still feels tired. There's always noise, even when it's quiet. Beeping machines, distant voices, the squeak of shoes, doors opening and closing. Time moves weird in hospitals. Minutes feel like hours, and then suddenly, hours disappear. I was in pain, and I was also in shock. My foot hurt so badly that it felt like it had its own heartbeat. I remember trying to stay calm, trying not to cry too much in front of strangers, trying to answer questions while my brain felt fuzzy. They gave me pain medication and it dulled the pain, but it also made everything feel unreal. Like I was floating in my own body, watching things happen slightly out of sync. Somewhere in all of that, while sitting in that hospital waiting space, I messaged my new boss. I had to. I didn't feel like I had a choice. It was a new job, and I needed to be responsible and let them know why I couldn't come in. I typed out that I'd had an accident, that I broke my foot, that I was at the ER. I expected maybe a short message back like, feel better, or let us know what the doctor says. Something normal, something human. But instead, he essentially let me go. Just like that. When I read the message, I felt the sadness hit me so hard that it almost felt like a second injury. I was already physically hurt, already scared about what recovery would look like, and now I was suddenly unemployed too. In a few hours, my life had flipped. I had gone from having plans and a new job and a normal body to being in a hospital with a broken foot and no work to return to. I didn't even have the energy to fully process it in that moment. I remember staring at my phone, reading the words again, like maybe I misunderstood, like maybe my brain was too foggy from pain and exhaustion. But it was clear enough. I felt embarrassed, even though it wasn't my fault. I felt scared about money. I felt scared about being stuck, about needing help. I felt that awful mix of shame and helplessness that comes when something happens to you and you can't fix it by simply trying harder. By the time we finally got home, it was after midnight. I was loopy from pain meds, dizzy, and so tired that my eyes felt heavy in a way that made the world tilt. Even simple movements made me feel nauseous. Getting from the car to the house was slow and awkward. My foot was immobilized, but I could still feel it throbbing. Every step, even with help, felt like walking through a nightmare. I was trying to keep myself together, trying to stay calm, but I was also emotionally wrecked. I wasn't just injured. I was grieving the sudden loss of normal life. I was grieving the security I thought I had with work. I was grieving the idea of being independent, even if only for a while. When I finally got into bed, it wasn't that comforting home at last feeling. It was more like collapsing at the end of something brutal. I remember feeling shaky and small, like my whole body had been wrung out. The room was quiet, and the quiet made it worse because now there was space for everything I had been holding back to rush in at once. Fear, sadness, pain, shock. I realized I hadn't eaten. It sounds like a small detail, but at that point it mattered. We had been at the climbing place, then the ER all night, and I hadn't had a real meal. I was on medication, and I knew eating would help. I also knew I couldn't easily get up and go make food. I couldn't stand. I couldn't move around the kitchen. I was dizzy, and the pain meds made me feel unsteady. I needed help, and I thought, surely this is the moment where your partner takes care of you. Not as a performance for friends, but privately, where it actually counts. So I asked him to order me some dinner. I wasn't demanding. I wasn't asking for anything fancy. I just wanted food brought to the house. Something simple, because I was hungry and weak and emotionally crushed. I remember expecting him to just say, "Of course," or "What do you want?" Something normal, something gentle. Instead, he looked at me and said, "There's no eating in my bed." He said it in the most condescending tone, like he was speaking to a child who should know better. The words were sharp, but it was the coldness behind them that really got me. It wasn't a neutral rule. It wasn't a calm, "Hey, can we eat at the table instead?" It was icy, possessive, like the bed was his territory, and my needs didn't matter inside it. I felt frozen. I was so loopy and tired that it took a second for the sentence to even fully register. My brain tried to catch up, tried to make sense of why he was saying that. Right then, right after the worst night, right when I was clearly not okay. For a moment, I wondered if I had misunderstood him, but I hadn't. And the shock of it hit me like a slap because it was so unexpected. After watching him be great in front of friends, after watching him carry me to the car, after spending all night in the ER, I thought I was safe with him. I thought the care would continue once the audience was gone. But the audience was gone now, and so was the warmth. In that moment, I didn't just feel hungry. I felt foolish. I felt like I had misread the entire situation, like I had been comforted by a version of him that only comes out when other people are watching. I felt my throat tighten and my eyes burn. And I couldn't believe that this was happening over something as basic as food. It wasn't even really about eating in bed. It was about the complete lack of compassion. It was about how easily he could switch from being a hero in public to being cold and controlling in private. I tried to respond, but I didn't even know what to say. I was exhausted and dizzy. I was in pain, I was devastated about my job. I needed comfort, not a rule spoken like a punishment. Something in me just broke. I decided I would get up, not because I was physically able, but because I suddenly felt like I had to remove myself from his space. That's what that sentence did to me. It made me feel like I didn't belong in the bed, like I was doing something wrong just by having needs. So I tried to get out of bed, thinking I would go somewhere else, maybe to the couch, maybe anywhere that didn't feel like I was being judged for existing. But the moment I put my weight down, even carefully, my body betrayed me. I fell. It happened fast. My balance was already off from the medication. My foot was broken, my body was weak, and I didn't have the strength or stability to catch myself. I remember that horrible lurch when you realize you're going down and you can't stop it. I hit the floor and the pain shot through me again, and then I was just there, on the ground, crying. Not pretty crying, not quiet tears, full crying, the kind that comes from fear and humiliation and physical pain all tangled together. I felt ridiculous and helpless. I felt like a burden. I felt like a wounded animal that had wandered into the wrong place. I was lying on the floor in my own home, injured and dizzy, crying because I needed dinner and kindness, and instead, I got a cold rule about his bed. It is hard to explain how dehumanizing that feels, because in that moment, I wasn't asking for romance. I wasn't asking for grand gestures. I wasn't asking for someone to solve my entire life. I was asking for food after an injury, and I was asking it from the person who was supposed to love me. He came over, and he patted my back, not hugged me, not held me, not apologized, not said, "Oh my God, are you okay?" Not even said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that." Just a pat on the back, like you give someone who is upset in a way you don't want to deal with, like you're trying to calm a situation down without actually engaging emotionally. And then he sent me to bed. With no dinner. It's such a simple ending to the night, but it still makes me feel sick when I think about it. Because after everything, after breaking my foot, after sitting in the ear all night, after losing my job in a message on my phone, after dragging myself home in pain, I ended up in bed hungry, hurt, and crying, while the person who was supposed to care for me treated my basic need like an inconvenience. And that was the moment something changed inside me. I started realizing that he could perform care when it made him look good, when friends were watching, when he could play the role of supportive partner. But when it was just us, when there were no witnesses, when he had the chance to show real tenderness and patience, he chose control instead. He chose a rule. He chose an icy tone. He chose to make me feel small. I lay there in bed that night, dizzy and exhausted, my body aching and my stomach empty, and I remember thinking, is this really my life? Is this what love is supposed to feel like? Because it didn't feel like love. It felt like being managed. It felt like living with someone whose kindness had conditions. It felt like being useful when it suited him and inconvenient when it didn't. The next morning, the injury was still there. The job loss was still real, and the memory of me crying on the floor didn't disappear. It stayed with me because it wasn't just an accident. It was a glimpse into how he treated me when I was at my weakest. It showed me what he was like when I truly needed him, not in a public, impressive way, but in the quiet, private ways that actually matter. And that's what makes it so painful to remember. Not the broken foot on its own, not even the loss of the job, but the feeling of being alone in the same room as the person who was supposed to be my partner. The feeling that my pain was real, my fear was real, my hunger was real, and still, his priority was control and comfort, not care. Even now, when I think about it, what stands out most is the coldness in his voice when he said, There's no eating in my bed. That single sentence, in that moment, told me more about him than all the public hero moments ever could. Because anyone can look good for a crowd. But the truth of someone shows up when there's no one watching, when compassion costs them something, when kindness is not performative but personal. That night, I needed a partner. I got a pat on the back and an empty stomach instead.
Let me hold the story right there for a second. You know how the dark creeps in slow. Well, so does a channel like this one. It grows one listener at a time, one night at a time, and that's where the subscribe button comes in. The bell beside it makes sure the dark always finds you when a new story is ready. No pressure, just an open door. Now let's pick up where we stopped.
After he tried to choke me in front of our 2-year-old, the house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a place where anything could happen and where I could not trust the person standing next to me. I remember the air in the room afterward, the way it felt thick and wrong, like even the walls were holding their breath. Our child was there. Our baby was right there, small enough to still need help with so many simple things, old enough to understand fear. That was the part that kept replaying in my head. Not just what he did to me, but the fact that our child saw it. The fact that he didn't stop himself, even with a little face watching him, even with tiny hands and tiny eyes looking for safety. I didn't have the kind of shock you see in movies where everything goes quiet and slow. Mine was messy. It was confusion and panic and disbelief all mixed together. I remember thinking, for a split second, that there had to be a mistake, like my brain couldn't accept that the person I lived with was doing this. I remember the way my thoughts jumped around, trying to find something logical, something that could explain it. Maybe he didn't realize what he was doing. Maybe he would stop. Maybe he would snap out of it. But deep down, I knew he knew. I knew he had control. I knew he was choosing to go farther than he should. And I remember this awful feeling that something inside him was enjoying the power, enjoying the moment where I couldn't fight back the way I wanted to. When it was over, I didn't feel safe in my own skin. My body didn't feel like mine. My throat hurt, my voice felt strange, and my hands were shaking. My whole system felt like it was still trying to survive even though the immediate danger had passed. I looked at my child and saw fear and confusion, and that look alone broke something in me. I wanted to scoop my child up and run somewhere, anywhere, and never come back. I wanted to rewind time and grab my child before any of this happened, like I could block it with my arms and make it disappear. But what happened next was what made it feel like a real ending, even though I didn't know it yet. After that moment, after the kind of thing you should never forgive and should never have to explain to anyone, I still tried to be the person who believed in fixing things. I tried to think like a spouse, like a partner, like someone who could say, "This was horrible, but maybe we can still find a way forward if you get help." I don't know if it was denial or survival, or the way I had been trained over time to keep hoping he would change. Maybe it was all of it. I just know I asked him as calmly as I could to please get help for his anger. I didn't say it like an accusation. I didn't come at him screaming. I didn't call him names. I didn't say, "You're a monster." I didn't say all the things I could have said. I said it like someone holding a cracked cup, trying not to spill what little hope was left. I said, "Please, get help." I said it because I believed, in that moment, that a person who had done something that terrible would have to be scared by it too. I believed that the reality of what he'd done would crash into him. and that he would feel sick with guilt. I believed he would look at our child and realize he had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Instead, he looked at me like I was the problem. He told me he didn't need help because I was asking for it. Those words landed in me like a second attack, only quieter and deeper. There was no confusion in his face, no hesitation, no shame. He didn't say it like someone who regretted something and was trying to defend it poorly. He said it like a fact, like a conclusion he had already reached, like he had built a whole story in his mind where he was the victim and I was the person pushing him to react. I remember staring at him and realizing that we were not living in the same reality. I was standing there thinking, "You almost killed me," and our child saw it, and he was standing there thinking, "You deserved it." The gap between those two realities was so wide that I could feel my whole life slipping into it. It was like the marriage I thought we had was suddenly gone, like it had never been real in the first place, and what was left was this cold truth I could not ignore. What hurt almost as much as the attack itself was realizing he truly believed he was justified. It wasn't just denial. It wasn't just him trying to avoid consequences. It was his belief, his conviction. He said it without remorse, without accountability, and without any sign that he wanted to change. It wasn't, "I lost control and I'm terrified of what I did." It wasn't, "I need help." It wasn't, "I'm so sorry." It was the opposite. It was him telling me that in his mind, his violence made sense. I couldn't stop thinking about what that meant for the future. If someone does something awful once and then feels guilt and horror, there is at least a chance that they will work to never do it again. But if someone does something awful and believes it was right, there is nothing holding them back next time. There is no internal alarm, no moral line, no fear of themselves. The only thing that might stop them is an outside force like police or neighbors or the threat of losing something they care about. And even then, it's not because they've changed, it's because they've been pressured. That's what I saw in him. I saw a man who didn't care about the damage. A man who was more interested in winning, in being right, in punishing me, than in protecting his own family. And the saddest part was that I had been trying so hard to make our family work. I had been trying to keep things calm, to avoid fights, to choose my words carefully, to carry more than my share so he wouldn't get angry. And in that moment, I realized it didn't matter how careful I was. It didn't matter how quiet I spoke, how much I explained, how much I gave. If he wanted to believe I was asking for it, he would believe it no matter what I did. I looked at our child again. I kept looking at our child like I needed proof that what I was seeing was real. Our baby didn't understand the words he said, not the full meaning, but children don't need to understand every word to understand danger. They understand tone. They understand faces. They understand when their safe person is not safe. They understand when their parent is scared. And it hit me that even if he never touched our child, even if he always said, "I would never hurt my daughter," he had already hurt her. He had hurt her by doing it in front of her. He had hurt her by teaching her that this is what love looks like, that this is what men do when they are angry, that this is what women are supposed to endure. He had hurt her by making her home feel like a place where fear lives. I wanted to tell myself that he would change because he loved her. I wanted to tell myself that being a dad would soften him. I wanted to tell myself that seeing her little face would be enough to make him wake up, but it wasn't. In that moment, it wasn't, and I couldn't ignore that. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces of our past started lining up in a way that made me sick. I started remembering all the times he got angry and then blamed me for it. All the times he acted like his feelings were my responsibility. All the times he made me feel like I had to manage him, like I had to predict his mood, like I had to walk on a careful line so I didn't trigger him. I started remembering the way he would say things that sounded reasonable on the surface, like, "If you didn't talk to me that way, I wouldn't react," or "If you weren't always pushing my buttons, this wouldn't happen." And now I understood that it wasn't just rude or immature. It was a belief system where he never had to take responsibility. A belief system where his anger was my fault and his violence was my fault, and his choices were always someone else's doing. That kind of thinking is terrifying because there is no end to it. If he believes I asked for it when I was trying to live my life, what else would he believe I asked for? If I disagreed with him, asked a question, set a boundary, cried, got tired, got sick, said no, said please, said anything he didn't like, would that become asking for it too? How many normal human moments would he twist into an excuse? How many times could he hurt me and then stand there acting like I deserved it? And then there was the part that made me feel invisible. When I asked him to get help, I was thinking about our marriage and our family. I was thinking about safety. I was thinking about the future. I was thinking like a person who still believed we had something worth protecting. But his response made it clear that in his mind, I did not matter. My fear didn't matter. My pain didn't matter. My life didn't matter. My child didn't matter either. Not in the way a parent should matter to you. Because if she mattered to him the way she should, he would have been ashamed that she saw it. He would have been broken by that. He would have done anything to make sure she never saw it again. Instead, he acted like the real problem was my existence. That realization is a special kind of grief. It's not just heartbreak. It's the moment you see the truth and can't unsee it. You realize you have been trying to build a home with someone who sees you as an enemy. It's the moment you realize that the love you thought was there was never the same love you were giving. You were building, and they were tearing down. You were trying to repair, and they were waiting for another chance to punish. You were thinking about family, and they were thinking about control. I remember feeling this mix of emotions that didn't make sense together. I felt angry, but I also felt numb. I felt scared, but I also felt strangely calm, like something inside me had finally stopped arguing with reality. I felt guilt, because that's what abuse does. It makes you feel guilty for things that are not your fault. I felt shame, because I didn't want to admit to anyone what was happening. I felt sadness, because I had once imagined a life where we were a normal family, where we were safe, where our child grew up with laughter and warmth and parents who respected each other. And I felt this sharp protective instinct, because if I had been trained to tolerate things for myself, I could not tolerate them for my child. I started thinking about the way children learn love. They watch, they absorb, they repeat. They learn what a relationship looks like by watching their parents. And I couldn't stand the idea that my child might grow up thinking it's normal for a man to hurt a woman, or normal for a woman to beg for basic kindness. I couldn't stand the idea that my child might grow up thinking that love means fear, or that family means walking on eggshells. I also couldn't stand the thought of my child growing up and asking me one day, "Why didn't you leave?" Because I didn't want to be the person who taught her that she should stay in danger. But even as those thoughts came, I had to face the reality of how hard it is to leave. People say it like it's a simple choice, like you wake up, pack a bag, and walk out. The truth is that after something like that, you are not just dealing with fear. You are dealing with shock. You are dealing with money, logistics, childcare, housing, family reactions, legal steps. You are dealing with the way abusers can become even more dangerous when they feel control slipping away. You are dealing with the question of how to keep a child safe, not just physically, but emotionally. You are dealing with the fear of not being believed, the fear of being judged, the fear of being blamed. And if you have lived with someone like that for a while, you are also dealing with the way your confidence has been worn down, piece by piece, until you doubt your own instincts. Still, that moment, the moment he said I was asking for it, did something important inside me. It made the situation clear. It made it impossible for me to keep pretending it was a one-time mistake. It made it impossible for me to keep hoping that if I just said the right thing, he would suddenly understand. Because he understood. He understood enough to justify it. He understood enough to blame me. He understood enough to refuse help. And refusing help wasn't just stubbornness. It was a choice. It was him saying, I am not going to change, and I don't care what it costs you. It was him saying, your pain is acceptable to me. It was him saying, my anger matters more than your life. I kept replaying that in my mind. The words, the look, the certainty. I kept thinking about how dangerous it is when someone believes their violence is justified. Because then it's not something they regret. It's something they feel entitled to. And entitlement is one of the scariest things in the world when it's attached to a person who can hurt you. I also kept thinking about how lonely it felt. There is a loneliness that comes from being in a room with someone who should love you and realizing they don't see you as fully human. They see you as a target. They see you as a problem to be solved. They see you as someone they can teach a lesson to. And in that loneliness, you start to feel like you are disappearing. Like your opinions don't count, your boundaries don't count, your needs don't count. You start to feel like you are just there to absorb their moves. You start to feel like you exist only as a reflection of them. In my head, I kept coming back to the same painful sentence. I did not matter. Neither did his daughter. Not in the way we should have mattered. Because if we mattered, he would have been horrified by what he did. If we mattered, he would have held himself accountable. If we mattered, he would have been willing to swallow his pride and seek help. If we mattered, he would have looked at our little girl and thought, I cannot be this person for her. I cannot make her childhood a place of fear. But he didn't do that. He chose the lie that protected his ego. He chose the story where he was right. He chose to keep his anger instead of keeping us safe. And I had to sit with the truth that I could not love someone into being good. I could not explain someone into having empathy. I could not beg someone into taking responsibility. I could not sacrifice enough to make him stop. Because the problem wasn't that I hadn't found the right words. The problem was that he believed he had the right to hurt me. Once you see that clearly, it changes the way you breathe. It changes the way you look at the future. It changes the way you look at your child sleeping, trusting the world will be gentle. It makes you realize that your job is not to fix the person hurting you. Your job is to protect yourself and your child from the person hurting you. Even now, when I think back on that moment, what stays with me isn't just fear. It's the coldness of his certainty. The way he acted like my pain was nothing. The way he acted like I deserved it. The way he showed no remorse. The way he didn't care that our child was there. The way he refused help like he was proud of it. Like he didn't even see a reason to change. That was the moment I understood that the marriage was not something that could be saved by effort or patience or love. Because saving a marriage requires two people who want to protect it. Two people who can admit when they are wrong. Two people who believe the other person's safety matters. I was willing to do work. I was willing to talk. I was willing to heal. But he was not willing to even admit there was a problem. He was willing to keep hurting me and calling it my fault. And that is what makes it so devastating. Not just that he hurt me, but that he believed it was justified. Not just that he attacked me, but that he felt entitled to do it. Not just that he refused help, but that he didn't even see why he should try. He didn't see me as someone worth protecting. He didn't see his daughter as someone worth protecting in that moment either. He saw his anger as more important than our lives. That truth is hard to say out loud because it feels unreal, like it belongs to someone else's life, but it was mine. And once I knew it, I couldn't unknow it. My ex-husband didn't become interested in some random new person. That's what made it feel so confusing at first. It wasn't like he met someone at work and slowly got close, or that there was a clear, obvious, this is an affair moment that I could point to and say, there, that's where everything changed. It happened in a quieter, stranger way, and because of that, it took me longer than I want to admit to fully understand what I was seeing. It started with him suddenly bringing up a woman I had never heard of before. Not once while we were dating, not once during our engagement, not once during all those conversations couples have when they're learning each other's histories. You know how it is when you're planning a future with someone. You talk about old friends, old stories, old school, people you knew, people you once dated, people you used to run around with. You learn the names that mattered. You learn the characters in their past. You can usually tell who made an impact because those names come up naturally. They don't have to force it. With him, that name never came up at all. There was no casual mention, no story like, oh yeah, I knew her back then. No, she was part of our friend group. Nothing. So when he suddenly started acting like she mattered, my first reaction was not jealousy. My first reaction was honestly confusion. I kept thinking, who is this person? Where did she come from? Why is she suddenly important enough to be in his life now? And it wasn't even exactly her at first. It was the fact that he was interested in his ex-classmate's girlfriend. That part alone should have made me pause harder than I did. Because it wasn't just some classmate he occasionally liked a photo from. It was his old classmate's girlfriend, and he suddenly became very, very interested in her. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't normal. It wasn't like one friendly message or a quick catch-up after years of silence. It had this weird energy to it, like there was something more happening beneath the surface, something he didn't want to say out loud. I started noticing little things. He'd be on his phone more. He'd angle the screen away in that casual, thoughtless way that suddenly didn't feel thoughtless. He'd laugh at something he was reading, but he wouldn't share what it was. He'd look distracted in conversations with me, like part of him was somewhere else. He'd respond to messages quickly, like it was urgent, like he didn't want to miss a chance to reply. And even though he didn't say her name constantly, the way he acted around his phone made it feel like there was a new person in our marriage, quietly sitting between us. At first, I did what so many women do when something feels off. I tried to talk myself out of my own instincts. I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself it was probably nothing. I told myself I didn't want to be the kind of wife who accuses her husband of something without proof. I wanted to be fair. I wanted to be reasonable. I wanted to trust him, because that's what marriage is supposed to be. Trust is not supposed to feel like a constant negotiation. It's supposed to be the foundation. But the thing about instincts is they don't usually come out of nowhere. They come from patterns. They come from noticing changes. They come from your mind quietly collecting small details until your body starts reacting before you've fully formed the words. I didn't have a neat, perfect explanation in the beginning, but I had a feeling. And the feeling didn't go away. It got stronger. So I asked him about it. I didn't come at him screaming. I didn't accuse him of cheating right away. I asked in a way that left space for an honest answer because I was still hoping for one. I asked about the friendship. I asked why he was talking to her so much. I asked why the conversations felt weird. I use that word, weird, because that's genuinely what it felt like. It wasn't a comfortable, normal friendship vibe. It had this private, blas, secretive undertone. It felt like something he didn't want me to be part of. It felt like something he would rather protect than explain. When I brought it up, I expected him to reassure me. I expected him to say something like, "Oh, I didn't realize it came off that way." Or, "You're right, I can see why that looks strange." Or even just, "I'll back off, because you're my wife and I don't want you to feel uneasy." That's what a loving partner does. Not because they're being controlled, but because they care about the health of the relationship. They understand that marriage isn't about collecting outside attention. It's about choosing each other, over and over, with your actions and your priorities. But he didn't do that. He didn't reassure me. He didn't seem concerned about how I felt. He didn't even treat my question like it mattered. Instead, he gave me a response that, in hindsight, was basically a warning sign wrapped in a casual sentence. He told me he wouldn't stop talking to her because he met her before he met me. He said it like it was obvious, like that was the end of the conversation, like that was a logical, unbeatable reason that should make me back down, like he was saying, "She has seniority and you don't." I remember just sitting with that for a moment, because the sentence sounded so childish, and yet it was delivered with full confidence. He met her before he met me. Okay, and what does that even mean in a marriage? Marriage is not some contest where whoever came first gets permanent access. Marriage is a commitment, and part of that commitment is caring about boundaries and respect. If I'm your wife, it shouldn't matter if you met her in kindergarten. If something is harming our relationship, if something is making me feel uncomfortable for a real reason, you don't dismiss it with some timeline argument like it's a courtroom technicality. What he was really saying, underneath the words, was that he didn't think my feelings should impact his choices. He was saying that my discomfort didn't matter enough to adjust his behavior. He was saying he had already decided what he wanted to do, and he wanted me to accept it. That kind of response does something to you. It makes you feel small, like your place in his life is not secure, like you're not a partner, you're just someone living around him. It makes you feel like the marriage has invisible rules you never agreed to, rules that benefit him and silence you. And it also makes you question your own reality, because you think, am I overreacting? Is this what normal people say? Do other couples talk like this? Do other husbands tell their wives? I knew her first, so your feelings don't count? I started noticing the way he framed it too. He didn't say, "We're friends." He didn't explain how they knew each other, what their connection was, why she mattered. He just defended his right to keep talking to her. That's the part that sticks with me now. It wasn't, "This is harmless." It was, "I'm not stopping," and those are two different energies. One is calm and transparent. The other is stubborn and protective, like he's guarding something. After that conversation, I tried to pay attention without turning my life into a constant surveillance mission. I didn't want to become obsessed. I didn't want to spend my days staring at his phone or analyzing his tone like I was studying a case file. I wanted to be married. I wanted a normal life. I wanted a husband who cared when I spoke. But the more time passed, the more I realized that the friendship wasn't fading away. It was growing. And not growing in the way normal friendships grow, where you might chat occasionally and then life continues. It was growing in the way emotional affairs grow, where someone starts to feel entitled to another person's attention, where there is this secret little world being built through messages and private, jokes and constant contact, where the outside person becomes a source of excitement, validation, escape, and you can feel it as the spouse. You can feel when your husband's energy is going somewhere else. You can feel when he's more lit up talking to someone on a screen than he is talking to you in real life. You can feel when he's protecting that connection, when he's making it a priority, when he's acting like your concern is an inconvenience. There were days where I felt like I was standing right in front of him and still couldn't reach him, like he was physically present but emotionally busy, like his mind was elsewhere, like he was investing his best attention in another place. And what made it worse was that I didn't have a name for it at the time. It wasn't a clear-cut, caught-in-bed situation. It was this gray area where he could always hide behind technicalities. He could always say, "We're just talking." He could always act like I was being dramatic. He could always make me feel like the bad guy for even asking. That's a specific kind of loneliness. It's being in a marriage where you're not being cheated on in a loud, obvious way, but you can feel your partner slipping away. You can feel them choosing someone else emotionally, and then acting like you're crazy for noticing. Over time, my trust started to erode, not because I wanted it to, but because trust needs safety to survive. Trust needs honesty. Trust needs respect. If every time you bring up a concern, you get dismissed, eventually you stop bringing up concerns. Not because everything is fine, but because you're tired of being made to feel like you're wrong for having feelings. I would catch myself thinking about her more than I ever wanted to. I would imagine what he was saying to her. I would wonder if he talked about me. I would wonder if she knew about me in a real way, like as a human being, or if I was just a vague wife in the background. I would wonder if he painted me as controlling or insecure, the way some men do when they want sympathy. I would wonder if she got to see the side of him that I used to get, the attentive side, the charming side, the part of him that made me fall in love in the first place. I didn't want to live like that. I didn't want my marriage to make me feel paranoid. I didn't want to be stuck in a constant loop of doubt and guessing. But the truth is, his response had already told me everything. When someone cares, they care. When someone respects you, they respect you. You don't have to beg. You don't have to argue your way into basic consideration. If you have to convince your spouse to treat you like you matter, something is already deeply wrong. The sentence, "I met her before I met you," kept echoing in my head. Because it wasn't just about her. It was about how he ranked people in his life. It was about him basically saying that my role as his wife didn't automatically come with priority. It was about him saying that his outside connections were not subject to the boundaries of marriage. It was him saying, in a subtle way, that he would do what he wanted, and I could either accept it or suffer. At some point, the marriage ended. I'm not even going to pretend it was a clean, simple process emotionally. Even when you know someone is disrespecting you, it still hurts to watch your life change. It still hurts to see the dream die. It still hurts to realize that the person you chose didn't choose you the same way. And then time did what time does. It moved forward. Life moved forward. I tried to move forward, too. I tried to heal in the ways you can heal after being dismissed and disrespected. After questioning your own instincts, after learning that the person you trusted was willing to protect another relationship at your expense. Then I found out what happened next. Now they are married and have a child. When I learned that, it hit me in a way that was hard to explain to anyone who hasn't lived something similar, because it wasn't just, oh, he moved on. It wasn't just, he found someone else. It was the confirmation of everything I had felt back then. It was proof that those weird conversations weren't nothing. It was proof that my instincts were not imagination. It was proof that I wasn't being dramatic or controlling or paranoid. Something real was happening. And I had been forced to stand in the middle of it, trying to be reasonable while my husband built a connection with someone else. It also added this extra layer of pain because of the timeline. He acted like he had some kind of moral permission because he met her before he met me. But the reality is, I was his wife. I was the person he promised a life to. The whole point of marriage is that the present and the future matter more than old connections that threaten what you've built. If he wanted to keep a relationship with her that mattered that much, he should have been honest about it from the beginning. He should have told me who she was. He should have explained the history. He should have set boundaries. He should have made sure I felt secure. Instead, he hid it until he didn't feel like he had to hide anymore. That's what it felt like I was only being told what he couldn't avoid telling me, like I was only being given pieces of truth, and even those pieces came with blame attached, as if I was the unreasonable one for asking. When I picture them now, married with a child, I don't romanticize it. I don't think, oh, maybe they were meant to be. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. I don't know. What I do know is that the way it happened left damage behind. It left me with a lesson I didn't want. It left me with this understanding that someone can stand in front of you, call you their partner, build a life with you, and still prioritize their own wants over your emotional safety. It's a strange feeling, because part of me feels like I should be over it. People say that all the time. They say, he's your ex, who cares now? But the truth is, it's not about caring in a jealous way. It's about the way the past makes more sense in hindsight, and how that clarity can hurt. Because suddenly you look back and see yourself in those moments, trying to communicate, trying to be calm, trying to do the healthy thing by asking questions instead of making accusations. You see yourself attempting to protect your marriage. You see yourself trusting the person you married to care. And you realize that while you were trying to save something, he was already investing elsewhere, already building the bridge out, already making choices that led him away from you. And the most painful part is how easily he dismissed you. Not just your feelings, but your role. Not just your concern, but your right to ask. He treated your marriage like it was less important than his history with someone else. Like you were temporary in a space he had already decided belonged to him. It messes with your sense of reality. It makes you question how long it was going on. It makes you wonder what else you didn't know. It makes you revisit conversations in your mind, searching for hidden meanings. It makes you remember moments where he seemed distant and you blamed yourself. It makes you remember times where you tried harder, loved harder, stayed softer, hoping it would bring him back to you, not realizing he was stepping away in his own mind. Sometimes I think about the version of me who asked him about their friendship. She wasn't trying to fight. She wasn't trying to control him. She was asking because something felt wrong. She was asking because she deserved honesty. She was asking because marriage is supposed to be a place where you can talk about anything without being punished for it, and he answered her with that sentence. He met her before he met me. It's almost laughable in a bitter way, because what does that even matter now? If anything, it shows how he thinks. It shows how he justifies. It shows how he shifts responsibility away from himself. It shows how he turns something that should be about respect into something that's about entitlement. Now on the outside, it looks like he got his happy ending. Married, child, a neat little life. But I know what it cost me emotionally. I know what it felt like to be dismissed inside my own marriage. I know what it feels like to ask for reassurance and be told you don't deserve it. I know what it feels like to be treated like you're less important than someone you never even knew existed until they suddenly became a problem. And maybe that's the part that stays with me the most. Not just that he moved on and built a family with her, but that he did it after making me feel like I was unreasonable for noticing, after making me feel like I was wrong for asking, after acting like I should accept his behavior without question because he had some imaginary first claim based on meeting someone earlier in life. I've learned that when someone wants to be loyal, they don't make excuses. They don't argue technicalities. They don't throw timelines in your face. They don't keep feeding a connection that threatens your marriage and then call you the problem for reacting. They protect the relationship they chose. They protect the person they promised. They understand that boundaries are not about control, they're about care. I didn't get that from him. I got confusion. I got dismissal. I got weird conversations that made my stomach sink. I got a husband who acted like my feelings were less important than his desire to keep talking to someone else. And later, I got confirmation that my instincts were right. Now they are married and have a child. That sentence is simple, but the emotional weight behind it is heavy. Because it doesn't just tell me what happened to him. It tells me what was happening to me back then, even when I didn't have all the facts. It tells me that the discomfort I felt had a reason. It tells me that the weird feeling was my intuition picking up on something my mind wasn't ready to accept yet. And as painful as that clarity is, it also gives me something I didn't have during the marriage. Certainty. Certainty that I wasn't crazy. Certainty that I wasn't imagining it. Certainty that I wasn't wrong for asking questions. Certainty that I deserved better than a man who would dismiss me with a line like that while slowly stepping into a future with someone else. That's what I hold on to now. Not bitterness, not jealousy, not the idea of competing with the life he built. I hold on to the truth that I deserved respect in my marriage, and I didn't get it. I hold on to the lesson that when someone shows you that you don't matter to them the way you should, you have to believe them, even if it takes time. I hold on to the fact that my instincts were trying to protect me, even when I was still trying to protect the relationship. And I hold on to the part of me that finally understands. I wasn't asking for too much. I was asking the wrong person. One year, Christmas came and went, and he didn't get me anything. Not even something small. Not even a card with a quick note inside. I don't mean one of those situations where a package got delayed or he tried to hide a surprise and it didn't arrive in time. I mean, he simply forgot. Like I wasn't even on his list of things to think about. I remember the way the day unfolded, the way I tried to stay in the right mood because it was Christmas, because I didn't want to be that person who ruins the holiday, because I wanted the day to feel warm and normal. I remember watching him open what I had gotten for him, and I remember that little part of me waiting, even though I could already feel the answer coming, waiting for him to reach behind the tree or behind the couch or pull something out of a bag and smile and say, I didn't forget, but that moment never came. What he did instead was almost worse than the forgetting itself. He had the gall to sit there and say he couldn't even enjoy his presence because he forgot to get me something. He said it like he was the one suffering. Like the main problem was his uncomfortable feeling. Not the fact that I was sitting there, embarrassed and hurt and trying not to show it. It was such a strange kind of selfishness because on the surface it sounded like guilt, but it wasn't the kind of guilt that leads to change or accountability. It was guilt that demanded comfort. It was guilt that turned into another responsibility for me. Suddenly, instead of him making it right, I felt like I was stuck managing his feelings about how he treated me. That was the pattern with him, and I didn't fully understand it for a long time. It wasn't just that he didn't show up for me. It was that when he didn't show up for me, he still found a way to make it about him. It was like even his mistakes needed to be centered, like even his failures still required my attention. I remember sitting there thinking, are you really saying this right now? Are you really making your forgetting into something I have to soothe you about? But I didn't say it. I swallowed it. I tried to keep the peace. I tried to be understanding, even though it was obvious that if he truly cared, he would have gotten up and done something about it. That one Christmas should have been enough for me to see what I was dealing with, but it wasn't a one-time thing. It was part of a bigger picture where I was the one doing the remembering, the planning, the caring. Valentine's Day would come around, and most years he rarely got me anything. Sometimes it was nothing at all. Other times it was some last-minute half-effort that felt more like a chore he wanted credit for than a gift he was excited to give. Our anniversary was the same. Even though I would plan a nice dinner or pick out something thoughtful for him, he treated those days like they were optional for him. Like celebrating me was some extra thing he didn't really have to do. And it's not even about the money. That's what people always assume when you talk about gifts. They assume you want something expensive. They assume you're being materialistic. But that wasn't it. It was about feeling considered. It was about feeling like your partner sees you as someone worth effort. It was about feeling like you matter enough for them to pause and think, what would make her happy? It could have been a handwritten card. It could have been a cheap bouquet from the grocery store. It could have been a small thing he knew I liked. It could have been him planning a simple dinner at home and actually putting thought into it. It wasn't about the size of the gift. It was about the message behind it. When your partner consistently doesn't do those things, the message becomes clear. It says, I don't think you're worth the effort. Or worse, I know you'll do it for me anyway, so I don't have to. It says, I'm comfortable taking, and I'm not interested in giving unless it benefits me. And the thing is, I kept telling myself it wasn't that deep. I kept making excuses. I kept thinking maybe he just wasn't good at that stuff. Maybe he didn't grow up with it. Maybe he wasn't romantic. Maybe he'd get better. Maybe I was asking too much. But I wasn't asking too much. I was asking for the bare minimum of being seen. The vacation was one of the moments that really sealed it for me, even though I still stayed longer than I should have. I planned that trip. I put time into it, the kind of time that people don't always notice. Picking dates, figuring out where we'd stay, making sure we had what we needed, organizing it so it would actually be relaxing. I handled the parts that make a trip smooth instead of stressful. And then I drove the entire time, every long stretch, every highway hour, every tiring part of getting from one place to another. Meanwhile, he got high and sat there like he was a passenger in his own life, like the trip was something happening around him, not something we were doing together. I remember looking over at him at different points, seeing him spaced out, seeing him relaxed in a way that only comes when you're not responsible for anything. And I remember feeling this mix of irritation and sadness because I wanted to be able to relax too. I wanted to feel like I had a partner who shared the load. I wanted to feel like this was something we were building together, not something I was carrying while he floated along. At some point, I finally said something, not even in a nasty way. I didn't scream at him or insult him. I mentioned that he could show a little gratitude. That was it, gratitude. A simple acknowledgement that I planned it, I drove, I handled the effort while he checked out. I wasn't asking him to worship me. I wasn't asking for some grand speech. I was asking for a little appreciation, the kind you would show a friend, let alone a partner. And he looked at me and said, "You would have gone on this trip without me anyway." That sentence hit me so hard because it was so dismissive and so cold. He wasn't just refusing gratitude. He was rewriting the situation to erase my effort. He was acting like my work didn't count because he decided it didn't count. He was basically saying, "You did this for you, so why should I thank you?" Like he was some extra accessory that didn't have to participate emotionally. And like I should be happy just because he showed up. It felt like he was telling me, without saying it directly, that I should be grateful he even came. That his presence was the gift. That he didn't owe me appreciation because he was there. And I remember thinking, what kind of relationship is this? What kind of marriage or partnership operates on that kind of thinking? Where one person does the work and the other person shrugs and acts like it's nothing? That's when I started seeing how much I had been shrinking myself. I had been lowering my expectations so far just to keep the relationship going. I had been accepting scraps and calling it normal. I had been doing the emotional labor of a whole relationship by myself, and then feeling guilty when I wanted a little back. And the worst part is that I stayed with him way too long anyway. I stayed because it's not always just one thing. It's 1,000 small disappointments that you keep forgiving, and you keep telling yourself it's not worth ending everything over a present or a holiday or a vacation comment. You tell yourself other people have it worse. You tell yourself he has good moments too. You tell yourself you're being too sensitive. You tell yourself you can work around it. You tell yourself love is supposed to be patient. And slowly, without noticing, you start living in a relationship where you're constantly adjusting to being undervalued. You become the planner, the rememberer, the giver, the one who keeps track of dates and traditions and what matters, the one who thinks ahead, the one who tries. And then you look up one day and realize the person you're with has been enjoying the benefits of your effort without feeling any responsibility to return it. That's what Christmas felt like. That's what Valentine's Day and anniversaries felt like. That's what the vacation felt like. It was the same message in different forms. I'll take what you give, but I won't match it, and if you ask me to, I'll make you feel unreasonable. When I think about it now, I don't just feel angry at him. I also feel sad for the version of me who kept hoping. The version me who kept planning dinners and buying gifts and trying to create a warm relationship with someone who was okay with letting me do it alone. I think about how much energy I poured into someone who didn't even think to pour some back. And I think about how easy it would have been for him to change if he wanted to. How easy it would have been for him to set a reminder, grab a card, plan a small date, pick up flowers, say thank you, take a turn driving, show appreciation. None of it required some impossible transformation. It required care. It required choosing me. It required not being selfish. But he didn't choose that. He chose the bare minimum. And sometimes he didn't even choose that. He chose to forget, and then he chose to make his forgetting my problem. I stayed with him way too long, and I know that now. I can say it clearly now because I'm not trapped in the daily cycle of hoping and disappointment. I'm not constantly trying to interpret his behavior in the most generous way possible. I can see it for what it was. It was a relationship where I gave more than I received, where my effort was expected, and where my needs were treated like an annoyance. And the truth is, staying too long doesn't mean I was weak. It means I was trying. It means I believed in commitment. It means I kept hoping he would finally understand what love looks like in practice. But love without effort isn't love you can build a life on. A partnership where one person always carries it eventually collapses, even if it collapses slowly. Now, when I think about those moments, I don't just think about the lack of gifts. I think about the lack of gratitude, the lack of care, the lack of basic respect. I think about how many times I tried to communicate and how many times he found a way to dismiss it. And I think about how much lighter it feels to not have to beg someone to appreciate you, because appreciation isn't supposed to be something you fight for. In a healthy relationship, it's something you feel without asking. It's something your partner shows because they see you, because they value you, because they don't want you to feel alone. With him, I felt alone even when he was sitting right there. And it took me too long to accept that loneliness inside a relationship is still loneliness. Sometimes it's worse because you keep thinking you shouldn't feel that way when you're not technically alone. I stayed too long, but I learned something that I won't forget. Effort matters, gratitude matters, showing up matters. And anyone who makes you feel guilty for wanting those things is not someone who truly values you. We were lying in bed together, and that's part of what makes it feel so unreal, even now. It wasn't like I found out through gossip, or a screenshot someone sent me, or a dramatic confrontation out in public. It was right there in the most intimate, everyday setting. The kind of moment that's supposed to feel safe. You're in bed, close to someone, in that quiet space where your guard is supposed to come down. And he was texting the girl he was cheating on me with, the girl he eventually left me for, like I wasn't even in the room. I saw one of the texts. I didn't go digging with the intention of finding proof. It was just there, visible enough that my eyes caught it before my brain even had a chance to protect me. And the words were so brutal that it felt like my whole body went cold in an instant. I would rather kill myself than be around her any longer. There are sentences you can unsee once you've seen them. They don't just hurt in the moment. They imprint. They take up space into your head like a scar, and that sentence is exactly that. It wasn't just insulting. It wasn't just, I'm unhappy. It wasn't even, I want to leave. It was a violent, absolute statement that turned you into something he framed as unbearable. Like your presence was so awful that death sounded preferable. It was cruel in a way that didn't even feel human, because no one who cares about you says something like that. And no decent person says something like that about anyone, especially while they're lying next to them, especially while they're actively betraying them. The way it hits is hard to describe, because it's not only the meaning of the words, it's what the moment does to you. It makes you feel like you don't exist as a person, like you're not even being treated with basic dignity, like you're an object in the way of the real life he wants. It's like being erased in real time. You're right there, breathing, lying next to him, and he's writing a narrative where your presence is a misery, where you are the villain, where he is trapped. and where the person he's betraying you with is the one he's confiding in. That kind of betrayal isn't just sexual or romantic, it's psychological. It's like he took your humanity and stepped on it. I can imagine that after seeing it, the loneliness wasn't just emotional, it was physical. It's that feeling of being in a room with someone and realizing there is no connection at all, no safety, no warmth, no care. Just you. Trapped in a moment where you can't even find the right words, because nothing feels big enough to match what you just saw. Even if you did say something, what could he possibly say back that would undo that? What explanation could ever make that sentence feel less disgusting? That's why it sticks. Because it's not a misunderstanding. It's not clumsy communication. It's a clear, intentional expression of contempt. And you're right, it will never leave your brain completely. Not because you're not over him, not because you miss him, not because your current marriage isn't wonderful. It's because the human brain holds onto threat and humiliation differently than it holds onto normal memories. That text wasn't just hurtful. It was a moment that told your nervous system you were not safe with the person beside you. It was a moment that made you feel hated. And when your body experiences something like that, it stores it. It files it away like, remember this, remember this, remember this, so you never end up here again. So when it pops into your thoughts, even now, even in a healthy marriage, it doesn't mean you're failing to move on. It means your mind is doing what minds do after trauma. It replays the worst scene sometimes, especially during quiet moments, because quiet is when the brain finally has room to process things it couldn't fully process at the time. Sometimes it shows up when you're happy, too, which feels unfair, because you'll be having a good day and suddenly your brain throws that line at you like a punch. But that's also common. Your brain can pull up old pain when you're safe enough to feel it. When you were in the relationship, you might have been in survival mode, focusing on getting through the day. Later, when you're stable, the mind revisits what happened, almost like it's trying to make sense of it with the clarity you didn't have then. That sentence also attacks something very deep. Your worth. It's not just, he didn't want me. It's, he made my existence sound unbearable. That's why it can still sting years later, because it's the kind of thing your brain wants to argue with, even when your life already proves it's not true. You can be married to an amazing person who loves you properly and still have the old sentence show up like a ghost, because ghosts don't care about logic. They care about impact. If it helps, I want to say something clearly, because it matters. That text wasn't a truthful description of you. It was a reflection of him. People who cheat often rewrite the story to justify what they're doing. They turn their partner into a villain so they can feel less guilty. They exaggerate, they dramatize, they paint themselves as trapped, because it lets them feel like their betrayal is escape rather than selfishness. That doesn't make it less cruel, but it explains why it's so extreme. He was performing for the other woman. He was trying to bond with her through contempt for you. That's a common, ugly way cheaters create intimacy with the person they're cheating with. They build a we by tearing someone else down. It's disgusting, and it says everything about his character. And the fact that you've never felt so alone and hated before or since makes perfect sense. Because that moment combined betrayal, contempt, and proximity. It's one thing to be mistreated from a distance. It's another to be mistreated while you're literally beside the person in a setting that is supposed to be the opposite of loneliness. That contrast makes it feel even more isolating. You're physically close, but emotionally, you're in the coldest place possible. I'm really glad you're married to someone wonderful now, Not as a happy ending band-aid, but because it means you got out and rebuilt your life with someone who treats you with care. Still, if that text keeps popping up and you want ways to make it lose some of its power, here are a few things that often help without you having to relive everything in detail. One is naming it when it happens. Not spiraling into it, just noticing it. There's that old sentence again. That's a memory, not a current truth. Another is a quick grounding thing, like looking around and identifying 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, just to pull your brain back into the present. Sometimes it also helps to have a short counter sentence ready, something you say to yourself every time it appears, like, "He wrote that to justify cheating, not because it was true." Or, "That sentence belongs to the past, and my life now proves it's wrong." It's not about arguing with the memory until it disappears. It's about gently training your brain that the memory is not an emergency anymore. If you want, you can tell me what usually triggers it. Is it quiet moments in bed, certain phrases, seeing a phone screen, or feeling especially happy and suddenly remembering that pain? I can help you build a simple way to handle the flashback thought so it stops hijacking your mood when it shows up.
If you've stayed with me this far, then these stories didn't simply pass the time. They stayed with you. Everything you heard tonight was real. Real people. Real moments. And in each one, something quietly slipped out of place. If you'd like more of the kind that don't let go so easily, subscribe to Crowvane Manor. There are more rooms left open, and more stories waiting behind every door. I'm grateful you spent this part of your night here. Rest well, and I'll be waiting when you return.